and the representative structure for the Sanhedrin, the Chavod.
Hello, thank you very much, Rabbi Edry, for inviting me, honorable guests. What a pleasure it is to be here and to present such important ideas. It's sorely missed. It should have been a long, long time ago. There have been attempts throughout history to establish the Sanhedrin and to renew the smicha from the time that it was lost to us, from the time of Rabbi Gamliel. They even say there's a tradition that the smicha was transmitted, was transferred. The 10 martyrs were accused of transferring the smicha, and that's why they were killed. And it was done secretly, and then Maimonides comes up with a mechanism that even were it to be lost, it can be reconstructed, it can be renewed. The idea is tantalizing because it really comes to the core of what is legitimacy, what is authenticity, who has the right to direct and to inspire the people. So these are things which have come, which are relevant today because of the talks that we've heard, and I have been giving it a thought over the last 30 years. I suppose I was influenced by my rabbi in Sydney, Australia, and Rabbi Maleki, who we studied together, Helchot Mamrim, the laws even the word mamrim is interesting. And on one hand, it could be to exchange, or it could be to defy, or it could be it has different interpretations. But it is a summary of a collection of the Mishnah, and the last of the laws of mamrim were the laws of judges and the laws of kings. And so throughout my youth, I was thinking about this, and in fact I did my doctorate on leadership, innovative, different types of leadership, and comparing different types of leaders between judges and between charismatic leaders in Judaism, and between poskim and between legislators, and all the different cacophony of leadership that we have. Interestingly, Judaism in the Bible is not short in any way of different types of leaders. We have the elders, and we have the judges, and we have Moses, who was a king of Yeshurun, and we have Nazirim, we have priests, we have Levites. And I wanted to tell you that I'm a Levi, and so is my father, and my descendants, and being so, I very much disagree with the idea of leadership which is run by Kohanim. I feel that the Kohanim did a lot of damage to our people, and over hundreds of years there was a lot of corruption in the temple, and the entire Bible and the biblical story comes to develop a set of checks and balances over the priests and over the king and over the judges and so on. And that really is our tradition. The tradition is the existence of checks and balances. One minute, please. No, you're talking. Okay, sit down. So that it's not to see the Bible in terms of a fundamentalism, that it is telling one specific cast of leadership, but rather to look at the entire history and the greater picture of what the Bible was getting at, and to acknowledge that there were historical periods, different historical times, and there were tides, and there were changes, and there were revolutions, and that the Sanhedrin, or that the leadership that will emerge in this modern day, will accommodate the entire history of our people and the wisdom that we've achieved from that history. The very term for Sanhedrin it's a Greek term. It's not a Hebrew term. The Hebrew term was Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the people of the Great Assembly, and the assembly being to represent the entire peoples and tribes, and the very idea of tribes of Israel goes to show that there was not one group or not one distinct identity in any way, but rather lots of varieties, and the assembly would represent this variety. And I think that that's very important in an emergent Sanhedrin, an emergent group of people.
The meeting of corners.
Meeting of corners.
Of angles.
Right. Very nice.
Your viewpoint is an angle.
Beautiful.
So I can see that, and you don't feel because you're not on my vertex.
Of course. Very, very nice. Exactly that. I couldn't have said that better myself. That and as this gentleman says that the perspective that people get is very limited, but with a centralized overview, one can endow the individual with so much more perspective and so much more depth, with the advantage of
think of the Magen David. There is a center field, which is constituted of the sum of all the other. Let's say you're thinking in terms of complementary colors, right? Fundamental colors. What do you get out of the three of them? White light.
refractions of light. So
Not reflection. The sum of
or the
is
source
white
of the
light.
refraction, or the object of the refraction going to white, from black light to white light through a prism.
There is black light, but it's out of the picture.
Well, black
In
light
terms
is
of
energy, which
the
is
whole
not
the
yet
whole
light.
visible spectrum is made of a gradient, which is exactly an octave of frequency between border red and border violet. Then you get ultra this and ultra that.
Well, that's right. Well, as an analogy, or not even an analogy, but the refraction of light through this prism to come to a white light. It's a very nice analogy and founded in physics. Yes, definitely. So it's not for no reason that the members of the Sanhedrin, as described in the Talmud, should have certain skills. They should know languages, and they should know science, and they should know the customs of other countries and nations, because they were that was in order to endow the best possible perspectives for the citizenry. So when
is made of three judges.
I'm sorry.
The Beit Din is made of three judges whose viewpoints combine into a final result.
Well, exactly. Well, how the construction of the Sanhedrin is really what I have been, I suppose, struggling with, because we see that modern day Judaism has many different leaders and rabbis and scholars, but they are not necessarily geared to take on administrative functions in a state. So how does one go about selecting from, on one hand, from our tradition, on the other hand, able to deal with the complexity of statehood? Today, the scholars and rabbis are dealing with issues of kashrut, or with issues of purity, or with issues of their society, but they're not dealing with macro issues of economics. They're not dealing with international law. They're not dealing with complexity. I call it a cross-sectorial complexity, and these are the things which emerge in statehood. And then because of that, we are allowing, or Judaism or even Zionism, or those who do not manage complex problems and deal with complex problems, allow for the complex problems to be answered and addressed by others. And that is a great tragedy, because because, well, I suppose I can explain this best from my own experiences as a professor of Jewish thought in China for 6 years, where on one hand teaching the ideas of Judaism and the Bible, on the other hand doing so in a highly administered, highly centralized, highly controlled and supervised nation, which was succeeding. In the last 10 or 15 years, China has emerged and has shown how powerful it is and how sophisticated it can deploy technology which was learned in the West to its own circumstances. But that, and they were very successful, and it's very hard to counter the argument of a winner. And that is really what happened to the West. The West saw how successful China was with being able to control its citizens and being able to build superhighways or expressways or train lines or buildings by not considering or by blurring the rights of the individual, and they realized that if they want to compete with China, they may have to do the same thing, and that hence the emergence of the World Trade Organization and the ideas of influence that companies and organizations and interests should be able to should also be able to deploy a power in order to compete with China. I observed this firsthand as a Jewish philosophy in China, and I thought, what is the redress of the Jewish people? And I tried to describe these things in a book entitled Jews and Judaism in Modern China, and also a Jewish Chinese Nexus, to look at how Judaism could do better, could do differently from China, and on the other hand, how China could learn from the Jewish people, use its incredible ability to deploy, but not in a draconian way. Now that's very naive to try to change China, and since leaving, that this is a Chinese issue. However, it is certainly a challenge now for Israel to develop a system which will not bring the world's population to a situation where the Chinese are in. And that looks like what is happening because there is no alternative being presented. My alternative, the one that I'm presenting, is directly from the Jewish sources, and it's directly actually the first commandment or the first theological idea presented in the Bible, that in the image of God, man and woman were made in the image of God. That every individual is a reflection of the divine, not the Communist Party, or not a company, or not a non-profit organization, or not a religion, but every individual is a source of great treasure, of great value, of great inspiration, that the soul of the person, of every person, is almost like a rare earth material that needs to be mined for what it is that they want. And this is expressed actually in a very interesting prayer that we have in the 18 benedictions, and it is to the prayer to listen to one's prayer, that God should listen to the individual's prayer, and that the individual has an obligation to want, and that God will listen to the wants of the individual and help the individual achieve what they want. It is really one of the only prayers which is individual based. Most of the prayers that we have in the 18 benedictions, we pray for the entire community, for all of us. We use the plural, but here this is a prayer to be heard, our individual prayers. Even though we say our, we use the same plural, it relates to the individual wants and prayers of the person. That is has been prayed for thousands of years, not for naught, but in order to convey the great importance of the individual in any final structure that we are going to devise. So that is one component of my thinking, how a Sanhedrin or an upper chamber or an authoritative body needs to address the human condition, not through groups or not through companies or not through nations or religion, but through the prism of the individual. Now that has only been possible with technology, and this scares people when I mention, because it's also mentioned by my detractors, by people in the World Trade, the World Economic Forum, the use of high technology, the use of artificial intelligence, the use of algorithms, but not the use of algorithms to assist a country or to assist a organization or to assist governance, but rather to empower the individual will. So that is a primary idea that I want to set before a Sanhedrin that will arise to adopt a constitution of the individual will. That the primary purpose of a future legislative or representative authority will not champion the priests of Tzadok or champion one group or another group, but rather will develop mechanisms and tools to allow and to synthesize the ideas of the individual will, so that people can essentially get what they want, achieve what they want. Obviously, not what they want in criminally, but the idea is that then people will have everything when they have surplus. When they have more than they need, they will eventually look into themselves, what it is that they truly want, what creative dynamics they would like to enter into, what friendships, what projects do they want to do, how they want to live their lives in a way that will enrich themselves, which is good, because an enriched self means that someone can give of their surplus to others. So this idea is really a zero-sum game. It is not a compromise. It is where everyone gets what they want. And so after returning from China, I realized that the bureaucracy not only in the world, in Israel, but also in the entire world, is such that it is so challenging and it is so debilitating that if it is not dealt with in a fundamental way, there will not, society and government will take over. Government will use methods. They have taken over. But will use methods so that the individual is the sum total of the individual is blurred into general formulas. And I think that one needs to change that fundamentally to ensure that the individual will is at the center of all government work. So, in the Constitution, which I wrote, and I hope that it will be put up there, and I wanted to present for adoption by a Sanhedrin or by a preparatory assembly that will take authority or presume authority over the Knesset. They would adopt a constitution of the individual will as it goes like this. The first goes, the 10 Chok Yesod L'Chukah, a basic law of the constitution. The 10 jurisdictions of state and their authority. This is the order of authority of the state. It'll be done in 10 jurisdictions. The first jurisdiction is of the jurisdiction of the individual will. The second jurisdiction is of the preparatory assembly. And the third is of the president. And let me discuss those first. Let me go to the second, the jurisdiction of the preparatory assembly. The preparatory assembly was an idea which was presented in the letter of independence of the state of Israel.
Last 30 seconds.
The preparatory assembly is an idea which was put forward in the letter of independence of the state of Israel. It required the Knesset, or what was to become the Knesset, or required the leaders of Israel to decide, to agree on a constitution, and without the constitution, the entire structure of the state would not have full legitimacy. In this letter, there was given several months for a constitution to be agreed on by all involved. This was not achieved, and so one could argue that the last 73 years of Israeli history has been illegitimate, has been illegal, has been a corporate takeover, a takeover of different interests. But there has not been, it is not in concert with the ideals put forward by the founding fathers. For a meaningful and authentic forum, authentic group of leaders to emerge, there needs to be a good reason. It needs to have advantage. It needs to be able to achieve something that has not been achieved so far. And that, to my mind, is a adoption of a constitution. The constitution of the individual will, and the group that does that, according to the letter of independence, would be the preparatory assembly. In the absence of a preparatory assembly, one looks around, who can do this? In the which will coincide, which will have the authenticity of our nation, of our culture, of our traditions. And so I put forward that a future Sanhedrin can do this and can achieve legitimacy were it to adopt a constitution, the constitution of the individual will, that would put the individual in the center of all the individual will and the individual satisfaction in the center of all its work. So let me just go through this constitution and then describe some other features about it. The fourth feature is the jurisdiction of information, instruments, and resources. That all of our information at the moment is owned by Google or by Facebook or by companies or by government organizations. They control it, but they do not let the individual control it for their own welfare.
They possess. What you own, they possess.
They possess. We own it, as you said, but they possess it.
We have a value. All data are worth money.
We're generating the information, we're calling it, but we don't have access to our own information.
Correct.
So, and not only do we not have access to it, but the government or large corporations are taking a hold and putting us in a stranglehold, using our own information and using our own resources and using our own instruments and using our influences without letting individuals work together with each other to help ourselves. So this is a great stranglehold, a great threat.
Go to Geneva.
I'm sorry?
We should go talk about it in Geneva at the White House.
I think that we should be talking about it in Jerusalem. Geneva has said its last word. Now
that's
Jerusalem
what
has to say
they're
something. The World Economic Forum needs to be met with a World Individual Will Forum.
Yeah,
That's
good.
We are here.
So the fifth jurisdiction is as a saying, the Reshut HaMechokeket, the legislative, can we have it back? The legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, the same as every existing government and the same that exists in Israel today. The eighth jurisdiction is the jurisdiction of measurements, mapping, and supervision. The method of measuring the effectiveness, the efficacy of government employees or the government to what? And this is the question which my esteemed colleague talked about, the question of value. That value is inherent, is anchored in gold or in silver. And I would propose something else, and something more profound than that. That value is anchored in two things: problem solving, solving your own personal problems, because nothing is more valuable than being able to solve your problems. And the second thing is to achieve your will, your individual will. And that instead of creating a value system on gold or silver, we should be creating a value system on how to achieve your will and how can other people, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, help you. Of course. That's what we're talking about. I came into contact with you several years ago about this idea.
Now it's happening.
To incentivize people to solve one problem. And this is where not blockchain, not Bitcoin so much, but a system of blockchain, or a revised system of blockchain, which I call SOC chain, society chain, where you build the value of something in the resources, the human resources required to solve your problems or achieve your will. So and you measure it, and everything is given a point, and I invented a measuring system. Just as you measure a meter, or just as you measure a centimeter, or you measure a scale, and just as we're told that we should be honest with our scales, we should also measure the efficacy of problem solving or will making, because that's a real scale. Someone can make a difference. When you have a government bureaucrat that doesn't help you, or actually tries to stop helping you, because there's more value gained in having you hire a lawyer who hires this or who hires that, and a whole full chain of bureaucrats which fund and give volume to their structure, which in turn feeds them and makes them important. That is no longer value. That is what you call where you change the weights. There's no value to that. That is hyperinflation. That is disguised hyperinflation, because there's no value there. So the eighth jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of measures and mapping. The mapping of, just like Waze, you can map where you want to go in physical space. And the method of mapping where you want to go in terms of your problem solving, in terms of achieving your will, so that it is very clear, everyone knows how to achieve it. And if there's a good method of doing it, everyone can adopt it, can copy it. And if there are people who are efficient, then we know that there are some people who are efficient and other people who are not efficient, both individually and both also in terms of government services. So this method of mapping and creating scales, honest scales, has got a position in this constitution. And the ninth is the jurisdiction of services, of area of municipal services to the individual. I don't call it the municipal councils or the municipal authority, but rather services given wherever you are. So that one should not be occupied with buildings or be occupied with who is in charge, because today it is done anyway digitally, and the place where the administration is not really important. It should be centered around where the individual is and what they want. And everything can be nomadic, but the will of the individual should be fundamental.
The more they clash with each other and feel displeased.
Say again?
The more gatekeepers there are, whatever process you're engaging in, say you're building, so you're asking for planning.
Sure. I'm not against gatekeepers. I'm not against gatekeepers, but I want the gatekeepers to, as they say, shoftim v'chol sharecha, the judges in your gates. They should be assisting. They should be, if there's a problem, they should be good, but they say, oh, you've got a problem? Oh, let's sort out your problem immediately. Not gatekeepers, not stopping you at the gate, not stopping you and saying you can't get in. But you,
okay, you have an appointment in 6 months.
right?
I have a pain on my back.
Right.
Kupat Cholim says, okay.
Right now, they come right now. They take you by the arm and they walk you there, and they get you everything you want immediately. And then they're measured, by their efficacy, and because that's what you want. It depends. You need to say what you want. Basically the only requirement of this system is
Facebook and Twitter.
They should all be competing
to a national jurisdiction.
Because they are driven. These companies are driven by advertising. But it would be a very simple legal restructuring to cause them to be motivated by serving the individual will or solving problems. And that's really what it is. It's a problem-solving Facebook or an individual realizing Facebook. The 10th jurisdiction is the jurisdiction of the individual will, where the individual says, are they happy or not happy? And this idea comes from a deeply Jewish idea that from Isaiah and from Micha, that one should sit under, that one is entitled, the messianic or the prophetic idea that one should be entitled to sit under their fig tree and under their vine tree, 2 symbols of great comfort, of shade and of surplus of the vine, and the good feeling of a vine, and the colors and the beauty of the vine. They should sit under the vine and the fig tree without trauma. So the ability to be satisfied with the services of the government, of your elected officials, is basic to the Judaic, to the biblical, and to the prophetic idea. Now, the question is, how can a Sanhedrin achieve this? And first of all, I will say that a Sanhedrin that does not achieve this will not offer anything valuable which doesn't already exist. It will just like the priests were corrupted at times, and just like government officials are corrupted at other times, so too a Sanhedrin can be corrupted if it is not done properly, and it needs to provide serious and well thought out and clever alternatives. So that's the basic principles of a constitution of a Sanhedrin. But now I'm interested in how is a Sanhedrin constructed. Traditionally, we have 71 members. Now, the story of the Sanhedrin dates back to the story of Moses and the representatives of the different tribes. It is not entirely clear how the representation works, and that's why I'd like to invite colleagues to figure out a method of representation. But what certainly is clear is that representation was in tens, in groups of tens, and it is said very clearly, and it is an idea actually interestingly given by Jethro, the high priest of Midian, which reflects basically the scholarship of other nations, of advanced nations of the time in the area. And it was given to Moses and said, take the ministers of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and administer the population like that. And if there are problems, they take them to the ministers of tens, And if they have problems, they take them on to the ministers of 50s and to hundreds of thousands. And if they still have a problem, they take it to Moses. And so this structure of a problem-solving social mechanism, which is representative of the people's interests in tens, I believe, is a basic and critical, unexplored feature of a future governance that has never been attempted in the history of jurisprudence, of statehood. Even in the time of David and Solomon, there were never groups of 10. There was never representatives of 10. It was an ideal which was stated in a naive Mosaic prophecy, but no one attempted it. And I think that this should be attempted today because it is very advanced. It is the epitome of decentralization with centralization. And it allows for people that really don't know about how to manage their lives to be able to employ, to bring a sar, a minister, an advisor to help them. And so the question is how to build this structure in tens. I call it We 110. That means that every person has access to 10 people or facilities or options, mainly people, to assist them. And I created an app. Do you want to put on the app? Just the other one? Okay. So I call it the iMachine, from to imagine, or iMachine, the imagination machine. Or another word for it is the solvulator. It solves problems. So the idea is that that here you see We 110, the third from the left, and I'll be short here, but the general idea is that when 10 people cooperate with each other, their power can expand disproportionately, exponentially. That if when 2 people or 3 people get to work, all of a sudden it reverberates. And if one can achieve the optimal effect of 10 people working together, it equals 3.628,800,000. The power of 10 can explode, or not so much explode, but expand, can inflate to 3.6 million and more. So that is the power of 10 people. So if we are able to, and my methodology of doing it, and there may be different methodologies, but my methodology of it, for every problem, 10 people can be nominated. Who can solve my problem? This person can, that person can, that person can, 10, and this one can. And therefore you use the individual imagination and you mine the individual imagination to identify the solutions to their own problems. So that in many ways empowers them. It gets them to use their mind. It gets them to throw their imagination to many different places all around which relate to their specific circumstances, and it employs them. It doesn't leave them lazy and out and having nothing to do with their own destiny, but rather it rings them in and says, who can help you? And so basically it uses and rides. It really takes the circumstances of the individual and uses them to guide. Once the people have identified who can help them, 10 people to help them with every subject. A person may have many problems, so for every problem they can have 10 people. But these people become the basis, the foundation of the Sarasarot, the ministers of 10. In addition to that, I have another structure which is different, but also that one can well, I think that we don't have time for this, but this really encapsulates the general thought of it, that a constitution of the individual will and the satisfaction of the individual will, and a method to use a centralized authority to identify what problems are and to administer the groups of 10, the ministers of 10. So, to be practical in this to be practical in this forum, I propose that instead that the first steps in developing a Sanhedrin, which may take a long time, would be to develop the ministers of 10, to develop a structure of 10s, and to start piloting problem solving and achieving people's wills through 10s. So, and that can be done together, where people can identify what they want and who can help them, and it can be done without computing at the moment. But I believe it is a good pilot and an important process to undertake before the more important process of a Sanhedrin of 71. Thank you very much for your attention.
We'll continue our segment from. Yes,
To me, you're just describing a free market.
Over? Yeah.
בבקשה.